Good morning, Daya. How are you today?
Morning. I'm doing so well. I'm happy to be here.
I am so happy you are here. And like we talked about before we got on the call, we always have our little chats. But I just feel like from the moment that I met you, we connected on such a deep level that I feel so blessed that this is like it's only been a year since we've known each other, but it feels like it's been 10.
Totally. And the vast majority of that was interacting like this.
Exactly, just like this. Well,
Yeah.
and here we are, still in the pandemic. Well, guys out there, I want to welcome you to Opportunity Knocks. It is a weekly segment where we feature amazing female entrepreneurs that have done just some of the most impressive transitions from one part of their life to the other. And why do we do this? We want to give women hope that there are ways to create opportunities for themselves. We want to allow you to create, take, evaluate transitions for yourself. So today I'm joined by Dr. Daya Grant, excuse me. And she is a neuroscientist. She is a mental performance consultant. And she is also, I'm going to call her a wellness expert and a mindfulness and yoga teacher. So I feel, like I said, honored that she's here with us today because she's just a wealth of information.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, well, what I'd love to do is first, like I always love to start by having people tell their story, not me tell their story. But you have a story to tell, and I'd love for them to hear how you got started. And I mean, I remember when you and I met and I was like, "Wait, you're a neuroscientist, but then also yoga teacher? That's fascinating. Tell me more."
Because I never really had a very clear plan. I just kept making decisions kind of in the moment in ways that, lit me up at that time. And it's kind of
Mhm.
led me to here. So
Love it.
yeah, um let's see, my dad's a doctor and I was always interested in science. And so in college, I found neuroscience and I thought it was fascinating. Waited the last possible minute to decide what to major in. And then end of sophomore year, committed to or declared neuroscience. Fascinated by the brain. I also at that time took my first yoga class after years of my mom telling me it would help with my ballet life.
Mhm.
Um, I finally in college took my first yoga class and was just like, oh my gosh, I can take over the world. Like, this is the most empowering thing ever. So that got me hooked.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. After college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do right away. So I went to Abercrombie and I worked as a manager for a year.
Mhm.
Learned a lot about leadership, and then found the field of sports psychology. And it sort of combined my love for sports with my love for the brain. So I did my master's in that. And then towards the end of that, the talk about concussions was really starting to pick up and gain some traction in the mainstream media. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's cool. That's neuroscience and it's sports. So why don't I do that? So
Yes.
I went to UCLA and I got my PhD in neuroscience and I really focused on concussions while there. And um, started working for a nonprofit called Love Your Brain that
Mm.
was founded by a former Olympian who had a traumatic brain injury, Kevin Pierce. And that was an amazing experience. I was a neuroscience consultant for them, helped to launch their education curriculum. And then I had my son and everything sort of shifted. And for 2 years, I was just really in that cocoon of new motherhood.
Mhm.
Um, and
Beautiful
I
stage.
had it was a beautiful stage, a challenging stage,
Mhm.
but it felt like that's exactly where I needed to be. And I was living in New York City at the time, got my mom friends together and was teaching. I had done my teacher training years prior. So I was doing, yoga for these new moms with their little babies kind
Mm.
of hanging out in this
So
space. And it
beautiful.
was a really sacred, beautiful, beautiful time. And then oops, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, we're back. We're
It
back.
happens all the time.
Uh, this is just kind of
That's
the
what's so beautiful about it, is that there's all these interruptions all the time, but that's real life. So,
totally, totally. Um, so so yeah, all in that time, so many years ago, when I started working with athletes, with the sports psychology stuff, like I was doing that over the years, and I finally said, well, this is really what I want to focus on. And so I launched my private practice, and that's where I am now. So I work with elite athletes on the mental side of their sport, really helping them with everything from pre-competition anxiety to dealing with injuries and coming back from them, goal setting, all sorts of things, all the stuff that happens in that space between your ears.
mhm.
And I incorporate my knowledge of neuroscience with a grounding in mindfulness and meditation and in yoga philosophy, and just
I
kind
love
of
that.
sprinkle that in.
I love that. As I said, that when I met you for the first time, I mean, I think it's so fascinating to study the brain, and which is why I was attracted to you in the way of understanding how people make choices, and what's the obstacle in between the yes and the no, and
Mm.
how quickly our brain processes those things and comes out the other side. So what would be interesting for me is if you could elaborate a little bit, when you're talking about mental performance consultant, right? And I know we're talking about, mostly for you, it's athletes. So you're talking about people that operate at the top of their game and generally love to challenge themselves
Mm.
to the highest level, right?
Yes.
So what do you think is the thing that stops people in those situations from having a mental block? Like where does that come from? Just
Mm.
curious. I mean, I
Um,
know every person's different, but
yeah, everyone's different, but there are definitely themes, and
Mhm,
there are sort of common threads that weave through. Fear is a big one. Fear
mhm,
is huge, and that's probably the thing that surfaces the most in my work with athletes. And it isn't always obvious. I think sometimes I remind athletes that fear can be this really quiet voice.
mhm,
Um, that's just enough of a hesitation, and it kind of gets you up here and really in your head. And most of the athletes that come to work with me or work with any mental performance consultant are heady, like they're really intellectually driven athletes, which has served them in a lot of ways, and it also kind of gets them in their own way.
mhm.
So while this is true for athletes, it's also true for all of us. Like I'm trying to get them out of here and like into here and into
The
their
heart
bodies.
center. Mhm,
Yes.
mhm,
And because that's where, if you can tap into that and kind of connect to that, then you're leading from a place that um, that is true, that is solid, that doesn't have as much fear, because fear is this, amygdala, hippocampus driven thing that occurs in your brain.
mhm.
So yeah, so it's how do we make that shift? And for every athlete, for every person, it's different, to get out of here and really into our body, into our heart.
Mm. So when you actually try to take one out of their head and into their body, is that through breath work or, um, I know often, with coaching, and I'm sure it's similar, it's about really slowing them down to feel, right?
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about how that works. Because I agree, fear is almost every woman's greatest demise, right? And if we could all address our fear on a more productive level, imagine how much more successful we'd all be,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think the first is acknowledging that we're not necessarily trying to get rid of the fear. Fear serves us in a lot of ways, right? It's so important for how we are motivated and our drive. Um, but how do we rise above that fear
Mhm,
and kind of be scarier than the fear?
mhm.
That's the key. And yeah, the slowing down piece is really important. And that the easiest way to do that is through the breath.
Mhm.
So using breath work, getting someone to slow down, and figuring out how to use that breath work. Yeah, when you're off the field, off the pitch, wherever you are. But then also, like, how do you incorporate that into your pre-competition routine? And it's also something that I do every time I sit down at my computer before I start working on a project. It's okay, how am I going to get myself centered?
Absolutely.
And the best way to do that is, yes, through the breath, but incorporating the breath into this routine that just becomes so natural that it doesn't leave room for your mind to kind of spiral and talk.
Mhm. It's almost
So
like you're developing, again, it's the habit and the routine, because
yes,
then it's not separate from yourself, it's
yeah.
in yourself. It's
Yes,
embedded as a part of who you are. And that's how they overcome, those feelings often, right?
yes. Yeah, and the more you do that, the more you incorporate those routines that are really mindfully developed, the more you tap into trust.
Mhm.
And when you can really get to that place of, okay, I am now setting myself up for performing to the best of my ability. I'm giving myself the best chance to do that, then you can start to perform better more often, not all the time, but more often. And then that trust piece is activated. So, oh,
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, this works. Like when I can drop in and I don't have to ruminate and I can still perform well, then that feeds off of itself and you have this momentum that builds, and you're able to
I
tap
think
into your body.
I think it's interesting that you use the wording like being almost like scarier than the fear. So the visual that came up for me, and I've never heard somebody kind of describe it that way, but in some ways it's true. Like, so for example, I often talk to people about like the self-talk before your presentation, that I would lock myself in your husband would appreciate this because he used to work at Mattel, or still does, I think. But anyways, like, it's like, basically I'd lock myself in the bathroom stall and I'd be doing self-talk and like pumping myself up, because if I did that in front of people, I think they think I was probably cuckoo a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was part of my game. Like, it
Yeah.
was part of like how to get myself in the zone to perform, because that's what you're doing when you make presentations, right?
Yes.
Because people have to receive them. So I think that's an interesting visual, because what came to mind for me is, people often talk about the power pose, right?
Right. Right.
So I thought about like, that's an interesting way of like, how do you make yourself scarier than the fear?
Yeah.
Like, I thought of like, the ghosts coming up above the cauldron or something.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to show you, you know.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah, I mean, it is. It really is about that power pose. It's about taking up space. So often when I work with athletes, especially if they're in a team sport, but not always, they're always competing against someone. Um, it's like when you walk in there for your warm up, you get big, like
mhm,
take up space. And that was
mhm,
something that I always struggled with as a dancer. So many times my teachers were like, you have so much in you, but
mhm,
dance bigger, like really take up space. And so,
mhm.
yeah, when you're an athlete, when you're someone going in for a presentation, I mean, at Mattel, you guys had crazy presentations that you did.
Yes, you did. But by the way, that taught me how you can present in front of anybody if you have to
Yeah.
do that. So,
Yes, totally. But you're absolutely right. It's taking up space and it's leading from that. And that sends signals to your brain that you are confident, even if you're sort of faking it.
hmm, I love that. So tell me a little bit about, for you, when you started this by saying like, you were always interested in science and your dad was a doctor, and so why not neurology? Like, how
Yeah.
did we, I mean, meaning like literally being a neurologist, like,
Yes.
versus deciding that you'd rather work with athletes? Like, how did that decision get made? Because I think that people often are in these crossroads of like, do I take the right turn or the left turn? And there's not a right answer,
No.
right? It's your turn.
Right. Right. So I actually never considered neurology, but I really did want to. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon.
Mm,
And then what happened is I did the math
mm,
and I was like, oof, I'm going to be, I don't know, something like mid-30s by the time I'm done with my residency. Like that doesn't seem great. The irony is that I still did so much schooling that I kind of ended up close to there anyway.
Mhm.
But that was kind of really what did it for me was, I don't know if I want to do this for so long.
Mhm.
And then I also felt like there was something more. I sort of felt like being in neurosurgery, I would be in this box in a way,
Mhm.
and I felt like I wanted to make a bigger impact than on one person at a time.
Mhm.
And so that's why the neuroscience made sense. It's like, okay, um, if I could instead do research that would benefit thousands and thousands of people, then that felt bigger to me. It
Mhm.
felt more in line with my purpose. Um, but then what happened was while I was in my PhD program, working in the lab by myself with proteins in
Mhm.
test tubes, I felt like, okay, this actually feels a little bit too micro,
Yeah, I can see
too
that.
far removed from people. And maybe that was my ego saying like, no, you need more immediate feedback. Like when I went to teach a yoga class after being in the lab all day and someone said, oh, that's what I needed. Like
Yeah,
that filled me.
immediate gratification.
It was. And so I knew I needed to find a way to sort of do both, like to feel like I'm making an impact, um, but also have, direct contact with people.
Yeah, I feel
So
like you're very much there's a very much an extroverted component of you. You do love to connect with people, and I can see you reaching greater audiences. That's it's funny. I just got this like random hit, and I know we would never talked about this before ever, but like I was like, wow, you should be running mental performance groups.
yeah. Yeah, it would be fun. I mean, it's funny because I'm actually like very much an introvert,
Mhm.
but I do thrive off of authentic connection.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
I really do. Like even, I mean, I just
Like
remember
your
like always
rising is
seeing,
the extrovert.
what's that?
Your rising is the extrovert. Like you need
Yeah.
to get a little bit and then you go back in.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. That's exactly what it is. And so I think I don't remember where I was going with that, but yeah, that
Like
like
you doing groups.
doing groups and like, yeah, I love public speaking. I've
Mhm.
always loved public speaking. Like, and of course I'm not having authentic connection with one person at a time, but
But you're imparting a message.
yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
really where it comes from.
Yes. Yeah, and it also like it does kind of get me out of myself and out of my own head. And I've over the years, I mean, I would present to so many groups of, yeah, athletes, whether they were sports teams or groups of parents of athletes or scientists at like huge conferences. And it was just thrilling. It was really thrilling. And I found my voice in doing that. And I realized after doing a lot of that I can do this in a way that doesn't look like a lot of the neuroscientists getting up there and speaking, or a lot of um, my mentor, my sports psychology mentor, was a unique human being, and he was big time in the field of sports psych, and he hated it, but people called him the guru of sports psych.
Mhm.
But he had his own way of doing it. And he said, don't you ever try to be like me, but try to be like you
Oh,
and
thank God.
figure out who that is. And so
Mhm.
that's like when I got up to give a neuroscience presentation about some really detailed neuro stuff. And I started with, okay, everyone stand up. Like we're going to take 10 deep breaths and like do 5 jumping jacks.
Mhm.
And these scientists are like, what? This is
What?
not how we start presentations. But it was great. It
Yes.
worked and it shifted things. And so it's been fun to find my voice in all of that.
I love that. So tell me, is there an opportunity that you feel like you missed in your life, or do you look at it more from a perspective of you're still reaching for those opportunities, that there's still so much more that you want to create?
Yeah. I I don't feel like there's anything I've missed. I think that everything that's happened has happened for me. Like, I really believe that, and it's happened in the timing that it's supposed to happen. So, um, there's a lot I still want to do. A lot I still want to do,
Yes.
and yeah, those opportunities I think I'm working towards, and I'm also trusting that they're going to present themselves when the timing's right and it's going to
Mhm.
make sense, even
Yeah.
if like there has to be, I'm kind of done with the grind,
Mhm.
um the hustle. It's
Mhm.
like I'm doing what lights me up right now, and I'm trusting that the opportunities will continue to unfold.
And
um
they will, because
Yes.
you believe that. You know,
Yeah.
you're meeting yourself where you're at and what you need, right? So
Yes.
it will, I mean, things are definitely manifesting for you. So tell me a little bit about what your biggest project you're working on right now that you want to bring to life, and how did fear kind of play a role in that?
Yeah. Okay, so I haven't said this like out loud, you know it, but I haven't said it to like really anyone else. But now I'm saying
It's a good
it.
thing we have 3 subscribers. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
Um,
kidding.
so yeah, I'm working on a book proposal.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. I've always been excited about writing a book, and I'm finally doing it and doing the first stages of it. And yet fear, oh my goodness, it totally rears its head all
Mhm.
the time. Um, but it keeps like this idea just keeps pulling at me, and
Mhm.
so I can't really pay attention to the fear. It's like this thing is calling for me to create it, and it's my responsibility to do so, and I'm the only one that can share it in my voice.
Mhm.
Um and uh so yeah, so I just
What called you to actually want to launch a book? Because I know you don't do things out of obligation. Is
no.
it the subject matter, or is it
Yes.
that you felt like it was missing from what people needed?
It was something that I wish I could read. So
Mm.
it's a subject that I am in love with, and it's also very much aligned with just what I teach and also how I live. It's a big part of my lifestyle. Um, it's centered on moving and meditating and the brain,
That's beautiful.
yoga philosophy, and it just kind of ties together everything that I've studied
And love.
and sort of like, I mean, we've all been moving since we were babies, right? And but for me, movement has been a really big part of my life, as I know it has been for you.
Mhm.
And I was blessed to be born into a family where we meditated as kids every night, and it's all of that's kind of developed. And I just my dad, many years ago, was like, at some point you are going to combine everything that you have done and
Mm.
are passionate about into your work, and I know you're going to write a book. And this was this was like, I was not a great writer in elementary school. Like, I did not do well in those standardized tests, and my dad really worked with me, and now he has his son who's a screenwriter and his daughter who's working on this book.
Mm.
um like, it can happen. Like, you just keep taking step after step after step, and listen to that voice that's telling you to do something, because there's a reason and the world needs it, even if a handful of people need it, and that's it. Like, I'm still gonna do this thing.
That's so beautiful. And I love that you are sharing that you weren't good at standardized tests, and that wasn't your strength. And, because many people, look at like a doctor or a lawyer, whoever it is, but they don't know all the obstacles that they had to overcome to really create that opportunity for themselves. And
Yeah.
people give up before they even get started because they think they're not good enough.
Yeah.
And you give them those beautiful gifts. And so that's amazing. I love that. And I love that you're bringing this book to life. And I know how hard you've been working on it. So
Thank
I'll
you.
be following in your footsteps one day when I want to agree to actually
Yes.
step into the book.
Oh, you will. It's a fun journey.
I think I'd actually really enjoy it. It's speaking of the slowing down,
yes.
that's not my thing. So
I know.
that's why the yoga is so important and the meditation.
Yes.
So, but I know we're on a limited time frame. I wanted you to leave people with any information that you think is super important related to how they reach you. You do work with actually even child athletes, I believe. Maybe you've moved out of that category.
Yeah. So I've shifted out of that a little bit. But I am asked by parents, like, can we get parents together? So while I don't work with youth athletes anymore, I will happily do like a workshop, an online Zoom workshop now with parents and teach all these things that I teach to the athletes themselves. But my private practice predominantly now is with college and professional and elite athletes. Um, but yeah, I love working with groups of parents as well. There's just so much they support at that age, the high school age, so much. So that's really important.
Well, yeah,
So
there's so much more to kind of gain they don't understand quite yet. Yeah.
oh, totally.
And
Yeah.
let go of. So
Yes,
yeah.
completely.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm on Instagram at dr.diagrant, dr.diagrant. And I love connecting with people there and just
And that's
really,
Daya, just so that you all know.
yes.
Yeah.
People don't know how to spell
You
Daya.
never know. They might be spelling it Daia.
Of
So
course, yeah, it's not a common name. Yes, dr.daya grant.
and what's your website?
And my website is diagrant.com. And yeah, there's a contact form there. You can connect with me that way. Um, and I'm excited to connect with people and yeah, just
Okay. Now my last question for you is this. Okay. What's your favorite pose in yoga?
oh, that's a good one. I don't know if I've ever thought about it. I would say the first thing that came to mind is actually Warrior Two,
Mhm.
which is interesting. And I think it's because that pose is the one I felt the most powerful in my very first yoga class. Like
Mhm.
it was when we were in Yoga Warrior 2 that I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so like I feel this warrior mentality
Mhm.
coming through." And so it's like an easy intro pose, but there's a lot of power there. I think there's a beautiful balance between grounding and rooting down and connecting to the earth and gaining that strength and then rising from there.
Yeah, I
And
completely agree with you. And I actually think it's funny because I go through that too. Like I do love Warrior 2 as well. I think there's something about your hands in that position as
mm,
well that
mm,
you're reaching. I mean, it's a stabilizer, right? But it's like you're reaching beyond your fingertips.
yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, you're expanding.
Well, I want to thank you for your time
Oh
because,
my goodness.
again, you're just so inspiring, and your approach is, like you said, in some ways counterintuitive to the way a lot of people think, but you are on your path and developing your way, which is the way we all should be considering joining our own journey.
Yeah.
So I really want to honor you for this time.
Mm.
And please, everyone, reach out to her because she is just an amazing soul. So,
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
so,
much for having me.
of course, anytime.